Welcome to today's webinar. I'm excited to see so many of you on the call. Thank you for spending your valuable time with us today. My name is Daniel Elliott, and I'm the lead for small business engagement within the Applied Cybersecurity Division at NIST. And I'm happy to be joined by my two colleagues, Amy Mon, International Policy Specialist within the Applied Cybersecurity Division, and Stephen Quinn, Senior Computer Scientist and CSF Project Lead within the Computer Security Division of NIST. So welcome to my colleagues and welcome to all of you today. Thank you for joining us. So today we are launching our CSF 2.0 webinar series. So thank you for being part of our initial webinar. I'm full of thanks today. The webinar is focused on implementing CSF 2.0, the what, the why, and the how. And I do want to let you know that this webinar is being recorded, and the video will be posted to the event page once it is available. And all who registered will be notified once the recording is posted. Also, a PDF of the slides has already been posted to the event page, and I have shared that with everyone in the chat. There we go. So today's webinar will have a mix of technical content and more general content to address the interests of various attendees. We'll begin with some foundational content and provide an overview of our international resources and efforts for the first few minutes. Then we'll dig into more of the technical content with my colleague Steve Quinn, where we'll highlight some of the specific tools available to you and steps for putting the CSF into action. And then we'll round out the hour with a call for public comments and some recently published resources, and also address some frequently asked questions. And then, of course, we'll answer your questions as well. So let's first set the foundation for everyone before we get into the more technical content. So the NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 is a collection of tools and resources designed to help organizations of all sizes and sectors improve their cybersecurity posture by managing and reducing their cybersecurity risks. Now, its flexible approach prompts users, to consider their cybersecurity posture within their own context, and then adapt the CSF to their specific needs, taking into account your own unique requirements, your own constraints, missions, resources, etc. And it's important to note that the CSF is designed to be used in conjunction with other resources, other frameworks, standards, guidelines, leading practices to better help you manage cybersecurity risks at an enterprise level. Now, on the left side of the screen, you see the CSF core graphic. This is the heart of the cybersecurity framework, and the CSF core functions of govern, identify, protect, detect, respond, and recover. They organize cybersecurity outcomes at their highest level, and they get more granular as you move into the categories and the subcategories. Now, it's important to note that these outcomes are not a checklist of actions to perform, and they're not specific actions to be taken to achieve an outcome, the specific actions taken to achieve an outcome will vary by organization and use case, right? As will the individual responsible for those actions. And the last point I want to make with this is that the order and the size of the functions and categories and subcategories within the core does not imply the sequence or importance of achieving them. So that is the foundation. So how did we get to CSF 2.0? Now, first off, many thanks to many of you who participated in this journey. The CSF team conducted an extensive multi-year global stakeholder engagement plan involving public notices, virtual and in-person workshops, and multiple meetings with organizations from across the public and private sectors. And these interactions included, we received over 427 submissions from organizations containing 3,008 comments, and that really vastly underestimates the full engagement with that whole process on the CSF revision, because many of those respondents represented dozens or hundreds of organizations and possibly thousands of individuals. We also held 3 workshops involving more than 2,400 participants from around the world. And after the team adjudicated all of that input, we published a CSF 2.0 on February 26th, 2024. But we didn't just stop there. The CSF team continues to expand upon the existing resources by regularly releasing new actionable implementation resources that we'll cover in more depth here in just a moment. And so that lays a good foundation for us for the rest of the hour. So now I want to turn it over to my colleague, Amy Mon, to discuss some of our international outreach and resources.
Thanks very much, Daniel, and it's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and I really appreciate the chance to share some information on our international engagement on the cybersecurity framework. And I'm very fortunate as one of my roles on the team to really help and lead that international engagement and facilitate collaboration and make sure that we're continuing to keep the cybersecurity framework a very global tool and bringing in that international expertise. That's always been a very important focus area for us, both all the way from the start with the first version of the framework and subsequent update in this most recent version of 2.0. And even as we have that newest version available, we want to continue that engagement and ensure we continue these conversations and learn from our partners and share approaches. And that will help us continue on that path to make this a global tool now and in the future. We've seen some great international uptake of the framework, both when it first came out and with version 2.0. I think from our last check, about 43% of total downloads have come from outside of the United States, which is very exciting to see. And in that process that Daniel outlined with the series of workshops and opportunities for public comment, we're very fortunate to hear from our partners throughout the world in global government and industry. We had voices on our panels and received comments from those who had already been using and implementing the framework and really finding new and interesting ways that we were able to learn from and improve in our version 2.0. We've worked with partners who have implemented or adapted it in various ways, some who have done direct translations, which has also been a very important part of our engagement. We had several translations of the last version, 1.1. And to date, we have about 9 different translations of version 2.0. And Daniel and others will be describing some of those resources we have for implementation, but we're also very excited to have translations of those quick start guides and resource overview documents in 4 languages now: Japanese, French, Portuguese, and Spanish. And we look to continue growing that repository of translations and very much would like to hear from you if you're aware of a translation or would like to work with us on one. We also have been fortunate to work with our partners across government, whether in the Department of State or in Commerce's own International Trade Administration and across our interagency, to participate in dialogues and share information on the framework and can have that opportunity to learn from our partners. And our partners in industry have also been very helpful in helping identify opportunities for engagement and stakeholders who might benefit from the chance to have a conversation, and we very much have learned from them as well. So that's something we're going to continue doing in the coming weeks and months. And we want to continue highlighting this work on an international website that we have of our resources. And it is beyond just the cybersecurity framework, but features all of those translations that I just mentioned, as well as of our quick start guides. And we also have blog posts or places where you can learn about the type of engagement we have. And again, very much appreciate any feedback of other areas where we could be working or other opportunities to continue making the framework a very global tool. We also have been continuing a lot of work in standards development organizations such as ISO, and especially over the last 11 years or so since the first version of the framework came out, our work has been very expansive there, both in terms of sharing our work as a contribution and having the opportunity to work with partners in that open, collaborative, transparent standards development organization process to develop documents that leverage and use the cybersecurity framework approach. And that's also been very important to us to continue that standards alignment. And I know you'll be hearing more in this presentation about our online informative reference program, which is a great opportunity for looking at mappings and crosswalks to show how the framework can be used along with existing international standards, and helps us keep up more in real time as standards and guidance are revised and new guidance and new standards are developed. So we are very excited to keep working with our partners in that ISO front and in general with our international standards alignment. We want to continue with those conversations and developing these translations and resources that can help with global use of the framework. So again, we very much encourage you, if you have thoughts on this or are looking to engage or want to share something with us on that international front, please do feel free to reach out for us and take a look at that website and see if any of these things might be helpful. So again, really appreciate the chance and hope people will consider getting engaged, as that really helps us at all steps of our process in developing our guidance. And even with version 2.0 out, we're happy to continue those conversations. Thanks so much, and back to you, Daniel.
Thanks so much, Amy. Really appreciate it. So before we dig into the more technical content, we're often asked what makes CSF 2.0 different. And we're going to be talking about that a lot in this presentation. So to kind of set a foundation for this discussion, I keep saying that because I really want to build up to my colleague Steve Quinn here. One of the big things that changed really is the name, right, of the publication itself. It's no longer focused on just critical infrastructure. It's a document for all organizations. Another big change was we elevated govern from a category to a function to highlight the importance of ensuring that cybersecurity capabilities support business risk and your overall enterprise risk management. Also with CSF 2.0, more emphasis has been put on cybersecurity supply chain management and to address a shifting threat landscape, technology landscape as well. We modified categories and subcategories to better give people the ability to manage and react responsively to whatever happens. And Steve is going to address that on the next slide here. And as I said earlier, we view the CSF not as a single standalone document, but as a suite of resources that you can use to manage your cybersecurity risks. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to the CSF project lead, Steve Quinn, to expand upon the key updates and to highlight a few of the new implementation resources here.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you, Amy. I must admit, you've probably seen the best that we have to offer already in Daniel and Amy. They're fantastic presenters, and now you're stuck with me. But we've talked a lot about the metadata around the cybersecurity framework, and so we want to kind of get into the implementation side of it and a little bit more into the technical aspects. And I want to talk technical for just 1 second. Everybody has a problem with feeling that they may not be technical. Most people do. So if you ask the CEO of a company who's technical, she'll probably point you over to the CTO. And the CTO, if you ask that person, they'll say, "Oh no, well the CISO is." And you ask the CISO, and the CISO say, "Well, no, actually my lead program manager is very technical. You want to talk to that person." And then you talk to the program. "Oh no, my developers are very technical. You want to talk to the technical developers." And then finally, you talk to the developers and say, "No, the physicists, they're the real technical people. They're the ones who actually create these integrated circuits that we write code over. So you want to talk to them." And you go to them and they say, "Well, we're not really the technical ones on this." So who really is technical, right? Everybody has their skill set for where they are inside the organization. And the cybersecurity framework is really cross-cutting. So you have to have the skills in order to, across the entire enterprise, you have to have the leadership skills. You have to define that mission. You have to have the hardware and software to support that mission. You have to keep that hardware and software in good function. You have to secure it. And this whole process is very much interactive, bidirectional, and iterative. So just wanted to kind of level set that, right? So while Dan has mentioned this is the technical part of the presentation, there's something in here for everybody. And whether you're wearing the C-suite suit or you're technically implementing these at the keyboard, there is something here for everybody. So technically, why did we, I just used that word, why did we update the CSF from 1.1 to 2.0? And the short answer is the technology window has moved. That's from that standpoint. A decade ago, outsourcing into the cloud environment was not happening on a large scale like it is today and has happened largely to many organizations. The supply chain issues have become more into focus. Not that they weren't addressed in 1.1, but they're more prominent now. There's different attack vectors that we see in the news. We had to address those as well. And then the software side of things, this is becoming bigger and bigger. Whose responsibility is it? Is it first party or third party? Are we doing what we need to in terms of our software development life cycles? Are we focused on the bill of materials, the SBOM that we talked about in terms of the libraries that are being used with inside our software? So we really needed to put a little bit more emphasis in these areas. And then, as Daniel had already mentioned, from a governed perspective, we really need to anchor cybersecurity risk alongside other risks in the enterprise under that umbrella of enterprise risk management. So those are some of the a little bit more in the weeds on why we versioned it from CSF 1.1 to 2.0. We can go to the next slide, please. So we're going to take a little tour here on the actual resources. And as Daniel has mentioned, this was not actually a release of a document. Yes, we released the Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 as a document, but we released it in so many other ways. We released it in ways that are downloadable, not just the framework itself, but references that are mapped to it. That's how you actually get in and implement the framework on a system level, following those references. And we have that information mapped and downloadable in JSON and Excel formats. And I want to show a little bit about that. So, Dan, are we going to do a tour of the website? I'd like to take people there if that's part of the presentation, or I'll speak to it.
We can do that. Let me get there.
Let's do that. All right. So the website itself, I like to take people on a journey, right? If you've seen this before, bear with it. It'll probably take a little bit of about 5 minutes of your time. But when we come away from this presentation, I want to make sure that you have tools to actually implement, to do something immediately to improve your security posture. So a quick overview, but a little bit of a deep dive into maybe some of the aspects of the site and the resources that you haven't seen. The read the document button in the upper left quadrant is self-explanatory. You click that button, you're going to get that PDF. Okay, that's the easy, tried and true way of consuming this information. The quick start guides, I do want to talk just a minute on that. Dan's going to click on that. We're going to go to this page, and this is an ever expanding resource. This is the how to implement, right? We get a lot of questions. CSF 1.1 didn't have an implementer's guide. And there's multiple reasons for that. But when we got to CSF 2.0, we heard the audience and we wanted to provide useful resources that people could pick these up and start doing something immediately with inside their infrastructure. And as you see, we have this across a number of different topics. Some might be of interest to you immediately. And these also delve into additional NIST resources to help with your implementation process. So if we go back to the main website again, we will have what are referred to as the informative references. Let's go to those for just a second. So you have the CSF core, which is, like that big easy button right there, the download English. And as Dan and Amy had mentioned, we have this translated into many, many different languages for our partners out there in the global space and for the multinational organizations who have partnerships around the world or office sites around the world. This download allows you to get the latest information that's mapped to the cybersecurity framework. So if we go ahead and let's, for the purposes of our call, we're going to do the download English button, if you don't mind. What that's going to do is it's going to produce a spreadsheet where you see column A is the function and column B of the cybersecurity framework. You have the category and then the subcategory in C. We have implementation examples to go along with the subcategories. Maybe Dan, if you could scroll down, we could get an implementation example on the screen. Beautiful. And then we have informative references. Again, these informative references are links out. Well, these aren't highlighted as links, but they're identifiers in other documents that are related to the subcategory on how to implement it, or might be a peer relationship to show a relationship between the cybersecurity framework and another standards document, such as ISO or CRI profile, or something that we have in other NIST guidance, like the NIST 837 or 221. We like our numbers at NIST. All right, Dan, let's go back to that main web page. And that column E, by the way, every time we do a new mapping or get a mapping, from an external submitter, it will auto-populate with inside of this dynamic spreadsheet. So you're welcome to visit it as often as you like and see if your favorite mapping is out there. We also have the ability to browse this, Dan. If we could hit that browse button, it takes us to what we refer to as the CSF 2.0 tool. Now, the tool is really the ability to dynamically browse the cybersecurity framework core. And we have a series of filters on here that we expand over time. The filters we have right now are the ability to determine what are first and third party applicable. That might be helpful to you if you're looking at your supply chain. And we also, as those informative references continue to grow, you may only be interested in perhaps maybe the 853 controls as they relate to the CSF, or the ISO 27001 control or elements as they relate to the CSF. So as you click on them, those will appear within inside of the core. And then you have the ability with that export button to download them in XSLT format or JSON, and it'll give you all of those informative references. So that's a nice little tool that we have, another way of consuming our core. And if we can go back to that main website. What haven't I touched here? Let's go to the CSF profiles. So CSF profiles, I want to touch on. There's two types of profiles in CSF. We just overloaded the word profile in CSF 1.1. And quite frankly, it's overused in a lot of different documents, but we have a specific reserved meaning for what a community profile is and what an organizational profile is. And here from the website, you can link to either one. I'm going to talk later about how to actually create an organizational profile, the one that's on the left, and you don't have to cut and paste into anything. You can just hit that download button and you will have the access to the cybersecurity framework itself. It'll be in the left columns. And then you can, it has columns for your current profile, and we're going to talk about this more, and your target profile and how to complete that. So we have a little template for you to use here on that internally facing internal organizational profile. And then we also have community profiles, which Dan, maybe we could take a quick visit out there. Community profiles for the cybersecurity framework, and it's not just for the cybersecurity framework, we have it for other NIST documents, are created by the community themselves, a specific sector or a group of organizations that want to create a target profile for those elements that are of highest priority and germane to their technology or to their sector. And so you're welcome to engage with the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence to consume these at any point in time or contribute or be part of the generation process. All right, Dan, I think we're back to our main webpage. Forgive me, it's allergy season. So, as I said before, we really wanted to focus on providing implementation resources, not to be prescriptive, but to give people a place to start when it comes to implementing the cybersecurity framework. And I think that takes us to the next slide. Give Dan a second to pull up the presentation again. The cybersecurity framework is really it's a nexus document, right? It's a communication tool as much as it is a guide for implementing cybersecurity framework or cybersecurity and improving your security posture. For the purposes of today's call, we're going to talk about it as a starting point in improving your cybersecurity risk posture. So the delta between CSF 1.1 and 2.0, if you've already implemented CSF 1.1, you're probably on some trajectory to upgrade to 2.0. And I'll state, we did not get rid of anything with inside of CSF 1.1. It may have moved around or been included in another subcategory somewhere, but we did not eliminate anything. And we'll talk about that in the FAQs a little bit more. So we did add, as Dan mentioned, the governance side about anchoring cybersecurity risk alongside other risks within inside of your infrastructure and govern. I talked a little bit about how some of the technology windows and trends drove the upgrade. And this transition plan that you need to develop or think about developing from 1.1 to 2.0, we provided about 3 different resources on how we upgraded from 1.1 to 2.0, and those are all available in the FAQ. we have 3 documents that you can look at that explain why we either merged or created additional subcategories. And you can find that on our website page on the FAQ. That's the left-hand navigation. And I think what I want to do is just really kind of move into the next slide here, Dan, because we're going to get further into the organizational profile. As I mentioned before, this is the internal facing exercise that you'll conduct inside your organization. And you have that template out there that'll give you that cybersecurity framework with information to fill out. We're going to see in 2 slides an example of that. But it allows you to assess what your current security posture looks like in what we refer to as the current profile. And then you identify what it is in terms of an outcome that you would like to achieve in terms of implementing better cybersecurity. And then the gap analysis that is conducted helps to give insight into the map to actually achieve closing that gap. And what's really important about the profile itself is it allows you to see the areas of weakness, the areas where you'd like to improve, and it allows you to prioritize what it is you want to focus on. So for example, if I were to say to your organization, if you lost your external facing website today, is that mission critical? For some organizations, it is. It's their lifeblood. That's their e-commerce site. And if the site's down, they're not processing business, they're losing revenue, right? That might be prioritized very high. If you're an R&D organization, perhaps out there, servicing up information that you've done on research, your website doesn't change all that often, maybe that's not the highest priority for you to focus on in terms of your cybersecurity resources. So that's just a simple example to demonstrate where you may want to focus your resources on those pieces of your infrastructure that matter the most, that are mission critical for the support of your business. And as I mentioned, there is a template that you can download and a quick start guide also that will guide you through in a more articulate way than I've described here on the screen itself, and the link you can find right on this slide. And Dan, I believe these were posted out there in PDF format, and those links are live inside the document as well. Daniel, correct me if I'm wrong on that one.
Correct.
Thank you. Okay, good. So I would like to move on to the next phase. We talked about the next slide here gets into this notion of integrating cybersecurity with inside ERM. And NIST has produced a series of documents. We like our numbers at NIST, I told you. That's the 8286 series. We have a flagship document. We have an A, B, C, and D. And they focus on cybersecurity risk management in the context of enterprise risk management. One of the challenges that we had with CSF 1.1 was we were trying to encourage the language of cybersecurity to be adopted in the boardroom. And we quickly recognized that the C-suite recognizes risk management language very readily, especially in their ERM process. So what we've worked to do is cast the cybersecurity risk management cycle with inside and running concurrently with the enterprise risk management cycle. So what you'll see in here is we call it the spaghetti diagram, but it talks at that high level, that BIA. Most cybersecurity professionals will be like, what's a BIA, right? That business impact analysis document should be producing in your organization a BIA register. And it includes all the high value assets inside your organization. So when you think about what's supporting the mission in terms of that hardware and that software, for example, or that technology stack, are we protecting that, right? And how do we prioritize that perhaps a little higher if it's in support of critical mission functions, right? So that BIA is really an input when you're doing your organizational profile. It's one of the documents that you're going to want to have on hand when you're conducting that target state and that current state analysis. This information is directly tied to what's my appetite for risk, interpreted into risk tolerance statements that have defined parameters of operation, and then what controls need to be applied in order to stay inside those tolerance ranges. Then we conduct our risk assessment. We feed all that information back up through risk registers. We aggregate, we normalize, we prioritize that information back up into the enterprise risk profile. You see that elevator on the right-hand side. And then that input is served to the board in how do I buy down risk? What are my priorities? How much is it going to cost? What is it going to gain me? And in that, if you read A123 OMB circular, you'll find that you also may have opportunities there because positive risks, my risks of success, if you will, also get treated alongside those negative risks. So you have both of those inside the prioritized risk register referred to as an enterprise risk profile that help the organization to better understand their risk disposition and make those executive decisions on where to allocate their resources. There's also information that feeds back into the BIA so that that information can be updated and perhaps even some tweaks to the appetite and tolerance statements if something comes back from that grassroots level, from that ground truth level of the system. If something needs to be adjusted because of possibility and planned for in terms of risk in another way, then that needs to be done as well. So this really highlights the idea that the executive suite and the risk managers and the cybersecurity professionals all work in concert to manage the risk within inside an organization. And I'd encourage you to have a look at the 8286 series when you have a chance. So I'd like to move on to that next slide, Dan. I told you that we'd give you an example of what a organizational profile entry might look like. And so this is, obviously very basic. Your spreadsheet may have 50 columns, or it may have, less than this, probably not less than this. But what I wanted to focus on is the current profile and the target profile. You'll notice in the profile, these highlighted in bold, you'll see what are identifiers for, in this case, 853 controls. So the controls, the security controls, live at a lower level of abstraction than any of the subcategories exist in the cybersecurity framework, because you have to get down into that stack to implement the security. And the 853 control might not be the lowest level. You may need to go to that, and you will need to go from that recommendation in the 853 control to something, how do I specifically implement this on the system? And we have other NIST resources that are linked to the 853 controls. For example, checklists on the NIST National Checklist Program give keystroke procedures or INF files or GPOs that can get into the technology itself and configure it according to your stated policy. So again, it really highlights that the CSF, it's cross-cutting, it lives at a higher level, and it's meant to work in concert with all of the other resources to improve your security posture. Next slide. Thank you. So as I stated before, the CSF really needs to be thought of as an organizing principle, kind of that starting place, and in order to implement better security within inside of your infrastructure. And it doesn't live and operate by itself. You'll see the additional resources on the left-hand side. It is by no means exhaustive, right? When you start getting into access control, when you start getting into cryptography for protecting confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data, you get into the actual algorithms that are implemented, you get what's available inside of products, you start to look at the post-quantum issues, post-quantum crypto issues. So NIST has a variety of documents that delve into greater detail in these areas, and you couldn't possibly expect to put that in one simple framework. So we use the mapping in order to be able to move between the documents so we can serve up the guidance in a more palatable way. And that leads me a little bit to the discussion of the Online Informative Reference Program, or OLIR. You can look that up, and maybe someone will put that link to the Online Informative Reference Program in the chat for everybody to see. But this is the primary way in which we feed information into that CSF 2.0 tool that I showed you, where the references are readily followed into the technology stack. So we welcome you to participate in that and look around inside of that Online Informative Reference Program website to see if there's anything of interest to you. A lot of times you may have implemented a framework or a standard And then you may be new to the cybersecurity framework, but you've already done a lot of the good things that are already there. Why not, take credit for that by looking through the mapping, see where there's equivalency, and then focus your attention in areas where perhaps there are gaps in the cybersecurity framework, may have some additional thoughts that weren't in that other standard or guidance document. And I'll stop right there. That's all I have for this section of the presentation.
Great, Steve. Thank you. And we're not done with you yet. So Steve will be back. I want to just highlight one resource. We didn't go into depth with all of the quick start guides, but one thing we did want to highlight, because we know we have a mix of large organizations, multinational, and we have small organizations on this call. And so we wanted to highlight one of the quick start guides that we released in February with the CSF 2.0, and that is the Small Business Quick Start Guide. And, for smaller organizations, a great place to start is with this guide. It provides small to medium-sized organizations, specifically those with modest or no cybersecurity plans in place, with considerations to kickstart their cybersecurity risk management by using the CSF 2.0. Now, we say small business, but this guide could also assist other relatively small organizations, such as nonprofits, smaller government agencies, and schools, to just name a few. And so we just wanted to provide a quick commercial for this and let you know that this is out there. Consider the SMB or the Small Business Quick Start Guide an on-ramp to the CSF 2.0. It's not meant to replace it in any way. It's meant to be an introduction to it, or as I said earlier, an on-ramp to it. And so with that, I'm going to bring Steve back, and we're gonna have a slide after this with all of the links and the event page. Hopefully, you've been able to see where I've shared the event page when I've responded to a few of the questions. But the event page has a PDF of this slide of this deck with all of the links. And there's one slide we'll get to in a moment that provides them all for a cheat sheet for you, if you will. But first, before we go into full Q&A,
how about it, Dan? Dan, I have a question for you, Dan.
Boy.
Why are there gaps in the cybersecurity framework enumeration? Did NIST forget to count from like 1 to 10? What's going on with that?
Bluntly, people do ask that. Does NIST know how to count? And so, I'm going to try to answer this. And Steve, please feel free to jump in. But the numbering of the subcategories is intentionally not sequential. So here's why. So gaps in numbering indicate CSF version 1.1 subcategories that were relocated as part of the major update to 2.0. And so any subcategories present in both V1.1 and 2.0 has a similar meaning in both. And so many subcategories in the revision process were added or moved from 1.1. And so an example would be in the protect function, right? PRDS3 from CSF 1.1 was moved to the identify function of IDAM08 in CSF 2.0. So as such, that PRDS3 subcategory identifier was not reused in CSF 2.0 to avoid confusion. And I've probably created confusion by trying to explain it. But PRDS3 would detail an entirely different outcome in 1.1 versus 2.0. So that's why they're not, in an attempt to avoid confusion, they were intentionally not sequential.
I was told there would be no math, Dan, but quote Chevy Chase there.
So I have a question for you, Steve.
All right.
So how does an organization go about implementing CSF 2.0? And we've talked a little bit about that already, but the implementing is the word.
Yeah, so implementing is another loaded word like profile, right? So we'll get questions that say, how do you implement a framework, right? You don't actually implement it because the implementation happens at the system level, right? Well, yeah, implementation is overloaded that way, but from a risk strategy perspective, if your risk strategy calls out the CSF to be used inside your organization as that organizing principle to ensure a better security posture, then what in fact you have done from an executive position is implemented the cybersecurity framework, or more specifically delegated that for implementation. The framework itself will offer implementation resources on how to secure the posture, and also through those informative references as well. So really, implementation happens at a bunch of different levels, right? Everybody working in concert. Remember, I talked about that. Everybody's technical, right? And nobody's technical at the same time. Everyone has a part to play for the implementation of that CSF 2.0. But I was thinking it spawned another question. Well, this is pretty good. This is like Laurel and Hardy, isn't it? Does NIST provide certification for CSF implementation of products? I see that question a lot on our mailing list, Dan. What do you
Almost at least once a week.
Right.
And so NIST does not offer certifications or endorsements of CSF related products or implementations or services. And there aren't plans currently, or there aren't plans to develop a conformity assessment program with the CSF 2.0. And so that question comes in quite frequently.
All right, we didn't rehearse this, Dan, but are there programs out there that that claim to offer or do offer some type of cybersecurity framework program? How is a NIST person supposed to answer that?
Yes, there are.
but they're not endorsed by NIST, right?
We don't endorse those programs or services.
All right, and let's get Amy in here for a question. Amy, I have a question for you. Are people allowed to use the cybersecurity framework? Are they allowed to reprint it, cite it in their products? Are they allowed to use it inside of their documents?
Thank you. That is a great question. Another one that often comes up. And again, we're very excited to see international use of the framework, and it is free and open source, but we do have for international copyright, we will issue a formal permission letter or grant that permission to use the cybersecurity framework and the content in it outside of the United States. But we're always happy to work with any interested parties on this, and I can help with developing that and making sure everyone has the proper formal permissions. In some of the Q&A I'd put, we have an international distro, but anyone can also just feel free to reach out to me directly. We'll make sure to put our emails in the chat. Thanks, Steve.
Very good. That's a great answer. So you mentioned for international folks, but what about folks who are domestic to the US? Do they need permission as well?
Always another great question. It is helpful for us, and while there are some of those differences and there's the technical being able to use it here, it is good to reach out if needed, because then we can also help in any way or take a look at what is being produced. So it is still always helpful if someone is able to reach out or has questions about using it. But again, we do encourage use of the framework.
Absolutely. So it is publicly available and free of use, but you can also get written permission, whether you're national or international, correct? All right. Thank you. We just recently had that answered inside of NIST, and I knew Amy would know the answer.
And I mean, the last question that we get regularly, and it's been touched on a bit, and actually there was another question that came in about mapping to ISO, is the CSF aligned with international cybersecurity initiatives and standards? Steve?
Yeah, very much. That dynamic spreadsheet that we gave in that example, where you click on that button and download it, it shows all of the mappings currently to the cybersecurity framework itself. I'm also aware of a 27001 from 2022 that is in the process of being completed and submitted to the NIST Online Informative Reference Program. So it too will show up in that informative reference column. And as you know, that can be just a great starting place for people who maybe have implemented one of the two frameworks and are required to implement both now, for example. Take credit for what you've done, focus on those things where there might be differences.
All right. So those were some of the questions we get frequently, and I know you're submitting your questions as they come in. Maybe this might give Steve and Amy a chance to look through some of the questions while I cover these next two slides here. As I mentioned, in the PDF has all of these, the links that we've been referencing, and what we'll also do is when the recording of this webinar is available, we'll also be sure to share with you this PDF again. The PDF and the recording will both be on the same event page, and so we'll email all registrants when that is available. But the PDF is available now on the page that you registered from. And so we just wanted to kind of pull everything together in one slide for you. And then one other thing I wanted to touch on before we move to the Q&A is some public comment. We regularly publish our publications out for public comment, and we want to hear from you, what your subject matter experts in various technologies and threats and industries, and we want your input on these this publication process. And so, as we said earlier, one of the major updates to CSF 2.0 is the focus on cybersecurity governance to highlight the importance of ensuring cybersecurity capabilities meet those broader mission, or meets that broader mission through enterprise risk management. And so one of those publication series, and Steve talked about this on one of the other slides, one of the series that helps practitioners better understand that close relationship between cybersecurity and enterprise risk management is the NIST IR 8286 series. And so those publications have been updated recently to align more closely with CSF 2.0 and other NIST publications. And so 3 of them are now seeking comment, and those are on the screen there. They're seeking comments through April 14, 2025. Stephen, you want to touch on anything since you're one of the authors?
Yeah, I can. These documents are largely written by and for practitioners. It's practical and actionable is the way that we keep talking about it. Well, as NIST, we're not the experts in enterprise risk management. We tend to be we are the experts in the risk disciplines themselves, in this case, cyber. So there's an integration point between these concurrent risk management cycles, and we write all about that. So we do delve into some aspects of enterprise risk management while doing so, but we focus our expertise where we are strongest in the cybersecurity risk space. So we really do encourage your feedback, especially those who are out there using it. We welcome the comments. We adjudicate every single one of them, and we'll plan to put updates. These should go final towards the end of the summer.
Great, thanks, Steve. And wanted to highlight a few other opportunities to comment. So there is we mentioned some other quick start guides. There's a draft quick start guide out that was published a week or 2 ago. I'm losing track of time, but that's the quick start guide for cybersecurity, enterprise risk management, and workforce management. So this document shows how the workforce framework for cybersecurity, or the NICE framework, and the cybersecurity framework can be used together to address cybersecurity risk. And so that's the most recent publication or quick start guide within a whole portfolio of quick start guides released since. Yeah.
Let me give a teaser on this one. So for all the enterprise risk folk out there and all the cybersecurity risk folk out there, when you're into your risk register and you're doing your assignment of a role or a person to a specific line in the row for the risk, there's some questions that have to be asked about that, right? Is the person qualified? Do we have the internal resources? If not, do we upskill? Do we hire? Maybe we change the risk response because we can't address this, right? So this particular guide delves into that business case for using the NICE framework in conjunction with enterprise risk. And there's a neat little teaser out here for the GRC vendors as well, because there's many HR uses of the NICE framework already implemented inside of certainly federal agencies and other places. But if that's already databased and you have a GRC tool out there too, it's probably not a big stretch to tie those two pieces together in an automated way. So that's a little teaser out there for the automation community.
Yeah. And there are I know we're getting short on time, so I'll be fast with these two. We have draft mappings that have been released as well. There's a mapping of 837, the risk management framework. That is mapped to CSF 2.0, and then we have a mapping of the NICE workforce framework version 1.0.0 to CSF 2.0. So we encourage you to check those out. And if you have input on them, those are seeking input. And so with that, again, those links are in the PDF of the slides. We will now take your questions. I also encourage you, we'll be releasing some other webinars coming up in the near future. We'll have a deep dive into the CSF 2.0 govern function. We'll be publishing that for registrations here in the coming weeks. And then we'll be doing a deep dive into the ransomware risk management cybersecurity framework 2.0 profile. And so those will be coming up. So save the date, one on May 20, one on August 20, and those are all in the on the event page as well. And with that, I do want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded. Slides have been posted to the event page, and the recording will be posted in a few weeks. Now let's get to some questions. I have a great one for you, Steve. First, when is the next version update for CSF 2.0?
All right, I'm going to answer that one, but then I want to take one too. There's some great questions out here. The short answer is there are no plans. There are no plans currently to upgrade CSF 2.0 in the very near term. Okay. We are, however, exploring trends in technology, such as post-quantum crypto and its effect on cyber, AI and its effect on cyber. Maybe, Dan, you can tease the workshop we got coming up on that as well. So we're following trends, certainly, and they may become catalysts for an upgrade or another guidance document that maybe isn't an upgrade to the CSF itself. So we're tracking it, but there are no current plans to version the CSF 2.0. And I'm sure a lot of the vending community out there who provide the tools to these organizations and the organizations themselves realize sometimes it's 3-year cycles to try to get these types of updates into products. So to version it too often would somewhat be counterproductive, and having people chasing a lot of upgrade nonsense, and if it's not warranted. Again, if the technology proves that we need to do a minor update or something like that, by all means, that will be done in the fashion in which we're accustomed, which is transparent with a lot of public input. I saw a great question here. It says, okay, then why doesn't everybody standardize on standards? I like that question a lot. And then it says redundancy, right? And I have to agree with that. And I think everybody is agreeing with that there is a lot of redundancy in not only cybersecurity standards, but many standards that are out there. The answer that we've come up with is mapping. Show the relationship by and between these, because standards are created at points in time when there's a driver. It could be, for us, it could be legislative, or the executive office of the president decides that we're going to do something like we did with the cybersecurity framework, where NIST had to create that. And we have these different drivers. We might get a requirement to do one for privacy. Maybe somebody else out there in industry gets together a consortia of people and puts together some of the best practices, right? Many, many different drivers on why we have different standards for the same topic. But in order to standardize on them, the best we can do at this point in time is map by and between them, and then perhaps in the future use that mapping as a way to standardize the standards. So we've begun the work, but just wanted to help people understand that these come into existence based on different drivers. Love that question, by the way, though.
Okay. We are quite outnumbered with the questions, so we're oh my God, there are quite a few questions coming in, and some of these we might have to come back to you offline and get to them. Let's see, there are a request for the next training. Can we discuss tiers? That's a great. We're always looking for ideas for, if you want additional webinar topics, please let us know. That's a great heard, and so we appreciate that suggestion. Let's see here. Steve, how does the risk register differ from a risk assessment?
I was just looking at that. So I would really encourage everybody who's interested in that answer to read the 8286, the NIST IR 8286 series, because we do really walk through the education side of risk management and risk assessment. So the risk register is actually a product. It's an output. It's an artifact of the risk assessment. It captures the results of your risk assessment. It tells you information such as how likely is this event to occur? What's your exposure? It does those calculations, and there's all kinds of different ways to do those adjectively or qualitative or quantitative or semi-qualitative, semi-quantitative. There's so many different ways, but your risk strategy will converge on a way of doing that. And then with inside that risk register, you're going to do that ownership assignment on who's going to take care of it, what your risk response is going to be, and so forth. So it's really the documentation artifact of the risk assessment process. It was a great question.
Right. Is there guidance to facilitate the transition from version 1 to version 2, 2.0? Version 1.1 to version 2.0, I will clarify.
There is, Dan, there is in the FAQ. How about that? So we didn't spend a lot of time on the frequently asked questions, but that resource out there on the NIST website is gold. As I'm looking through the answers, and we update that frequently, by the way, as we get questions that may not be answered in the FAQ. But as I'm looking through some of these questions here, a lot of them are answered within inside of the FAQ itself. And Dan, I know this is kind of impromptu, but could we actually nav to the website and look where that FAQ is? I don't know about you, but I like to see stuff. So if I hear about it in a webinar, I like to see someone browse to it through their generic browser and actually see it. I know I'm calling an audible there, Dan. Oh, look at him go. All right, he's got it. So right there on the left-hand side, there's all the resources, and there's that FAQ. Go ahead and click on that, Dan. And here we go. Oh, what's the first topic? Transitioning from CSF 1.1 to 2.0. So right in there, you're going to have answers to your questions. You're going to have links to those documents we talked about. Where did things go in CSF 1.1? Can this count? All that kind of stuff is addressed within inside of these FAQs. And if you could just maybe scroll down and show some of the other topics in the FAQ. Excellent, right? Using the framework, small businesses. Don't forget our quick start implementation guides. We recognize it's not just for USG, but certainly for federal government as well. So there's quite a bit of information out here in this FAQ, and I'd really encourage, we have 3 minutes left. I know we're not going to get to too many more questions, but there is a lot of information in this FAQ. Dan, do we have time for one more maybe?
We do, yeah. Let me get back to the PowerPoint. I might let you pick which one while I navigate back here.
Well, let's see here. Find a good one. Amy, do you see a good one out there? See an international question maybe?
Yes, apologies. I know I'm probably not getting to all of them, but in general, I can try and respond that. Please do feel free to reach out, or we can follow up after this if, to discuss any specific or unique opportunities for collaboration or potential translations and how we can work together on that. So always happy to have any of those additional discussions after this concludes to see what opportunities we might have to work together.
Yep, very good. I did find one, Amy. I found the question: Will there be an OSCAL translation of the NIST CSF 2.0? And in fact, we do have an OSCAL translation of the NIST CSF 2.0. So it is in OSCAL, and you can download that from the website as well. There you go. I see an applause. That must be the person who asked the question. I did want to also thank everybody, Dan. I know you're going to close, but a lot of good feedback from people and the applause and the emojis and stuff. Thank you. It's very encouraging as we give this presentation, to see that type of feedback. So thank you very much. That's been very generous of you.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Steve. Thank you, Amy. And thanks to all of you for spending. I know your time is valuable and you have a lot going on, so I really appreciate you spending time with us in this hour. To learn more about the CSF 2.0, as always, I've included the email address there. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. The events page, nist.gov/cyberframework/events, where you can find the dates for the future events, and that's where we'll post also the recording of this webinar, and that's where the slides are. And with that, we are approaching the top of the hour, so we will conclude. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Everybody.